Hi, I'm Hillary Acer, welcoming you to Raise the Line with Osmosis from Elsevier, an ongoing exploration about how to improve health and healthcare. Today, we continue our Next Gen Journeys series, featuring conversations with learners and early career clinicians around the globe to get their fresh perspectives on education, medicine, and the future of healthcare. The journey of our guest today, Parsa Mohri, is currently happening in Turkey, where he is a medical student at Acibadem University. Outside of his studies, Parsa is a member of the swim team and co-founder of the Medical Humor Club. We got to know Parsa as a member of the Osmosis Medical Education Fellowship Program, or now known as the Osmosis Health Leadership Initiative. And I'm eager to learn more about his educational experiences as well as what his future plans are. Thank you so much for joining us today, Parsa.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So we always like to start with the beginning. What first got you interested in medicine?
I really love that question because I think the reason why I picked medicine is not what many people would probably be thinking of, which is, of course, it is to help other people. But the train of thought started off when I was in school, frustrated that we're going to start, like our weekend just finished, we're going to start on Monday. And I thought to myself, wow, like after a nice weekend, what would I like to wake up to on every single Monday morning? And it started from there. I was like, I like to go to it or be in a career where, I enjoy it at one hand. So I was thinking, what do I enjoy? And from my studies, I just generally enjoyed a lot of biology back in high school. At the same time, I wanted to make my Mondays not just enjoyable, but meaningful as well. So that's where the part where I like to spend my Monday mornings to kind of in service of other people. And the only career at that time that I thought of and stuck to was medicine. And because it is an honor to be able to have the trust of a patient to be treating them sometimes at the worst times of their lives, or sometimes just every other day. But I think it's an honor. So that's kind of why I picked medicine, which was to find a meaning to why I wake up on my Monday mornings after a nice weekend. And so on that aspect, it was finding the meaning and the value, and as well enjoying it at the same time. And that's medicine just fitted all those criteria for me.
I love that, finding meaning on the Monday mornings. And obviously medicine, has so much meaning. As you mentioned, you're really finding people sometimes when they're most vulnerable and in need of support, right? So it's a real privilege to be able to stand beside them, to get to know them and serve them as they hopefully improve their health journey from where you find them in the medical field. Now, orient us a little bit, Parsa. So where are you in the world and where have you been studying for the last few years?
So I'm based in Istanbul in Turkey, and I've been here for the past, I guess this is my 6th year, my final year. So I've been here since 2019. Prior to that, I was in Dubai, where I basically went from year 1 up to 13 of high school, where I finished and moved to Turkey. And this is where I've been for the past few years, which passed really, really quickly.
It's amazing how fast it goes. Yeah. So you're in Turkey, in Istanbul, and you've been studying at Acibadem University. How has your medical school experience been so far? Have there been any ups and downs along the way that were particularly noteworthy?
I think every year had its own theme of ups and downs, I would say. The first year was basically entering a medical school was actually, for me, it was kind of getting used to Turkey because I've never lived in Turkey before, even though I do have roots to being Turkish, but I've never grew up here, grew up in a different country. So the culture was different, the language was different. Integrating, I felt like I needed to get used to integrating. So year 1 was more of like getting that integration in, and as well realizing how you study for medical school is very different from how you study for high school. So that self-discovery or into finding which ways would accommodate me to learn my topics the best was a quest of mine. It got better, but still kind of, you have to adapt to every changes there are to one's journey. So year 2, the pandemic happened, unfortunately. And so we were all indoors. I really just remember sometimes when I had that chance to just go out, I would just look at the lovely nature and try to not take that for granted, as I tend to do on a daily basis. So in year 3 we got back in university, and year 4 was the clinical years. That was I think the hardest part, because that was where we kind of saw everything we learned in theory put into practice, but at the same time, it was where everything that you theoretically learned about, for example, this disease could cause pain, you're now seeing that patient with the pain. It was quite an eye opener for me to really see the conditions that patients came in. So I think from year 4 and after, the clinical years, I would say, were the most eye opening, and I would probably repeat those 3 times again rather than repeat my preclinical years, because I just wish I took more opportunity to really appreciate and honor my clinical rotations.
Thanks for walking us through that. It sounds like that was a pretty big transition, not just going from Dubai to Turkey and learning, as you mentioned, the new language, the new culture. And what you also kind of touched on is the different academic system in Europe and beyond. It's pretty common to go right from high school, right, or that secondary education into medical school, whereas within the US, we know most of our students will go into an undergraduate curriculum where they study maybe biology, maybe something else, and they make sure to take the prerequisites so they can then go to medical school for an additional 4 years. So we see a bit of a condensed education and curriculum and a bit more of a fast track to gaining that medical degree. So that's a lot to be thrown into, especially coming right out of high school. It sounds like you were able to navigate that. And as you mentioned, a lot of self-discovery happened during that time. You were figuring out your learning styles and just kind of how to be a medical student, it sounds like. So lots of learning. And then, of course, COVID hits. So tell us a little bit more about what that experience was like, going from, not just a new place and new challenging academic environment, but then on top of that, COVID.
That was very interesting. I think from one aspect, like the COVID was quite, I think, a scary period for everyone, especially for those. I felt really bad for those who were just starting university with COVID. At least I felt just a bit privileged that at least I was having it in my second year. But I think what COVID did, kind of how it affected us, was that everything was turned online, and through Zoom we would have live lectures. But in year 1, I was already struggling to keep up with the lectures, like the live lectures. I felt like as soon as I didn't understand something for 2 minutes, I would have lost the whole efficiency or productivity, or I wouldn't get anything else out of that lecture. If I've just missed 2 minutes, I zoned out, or for whatever reason, might have been distraction. But when we turned online, we did do Zoom lectures, which again, I really struggled there. But then the Zoom lectures were recorded, so and uploaded, where I could have come back and watch it as a video. And I think that really helped me, because it helped me to go at my own pace at the same time. And actually, I think that's I think in connection to Osmosis, that's where I kind of benefited a lot, because I felt like being able to study at your own pace, or at a pace that you feel comfortable, at a location where you feel comfortable. So some people don't really like classrooms; they just like to self-study in a library, for example. And I completely understand that now, because those videos, the fact that you're just able to either slow it down, go back, re-listen, I think that really helped me to better understand my content, rather than just, sit there and time passes by, you really pick up any content and you go back home and then you have to restudy everything. It's so yeah, I think COVID did unfortunately isolate everyone. But I think there was where I started to really change my studying habits with the integration of different methods, and in this topic, I guess, osmosis as well.
Wow. Yeah. So it sounds like it had kind of both pros and cons, you being able to maybe personalize your learning more in finding tools like osmosis, which of course we're super happy that you found your way to us, not only the product, but you've been a big part of our community and our student leadership program. But also it sounds like you might have saved a little bit of time, whereas you were in lecture all day, maybe consuming information in classes, and then you had to go home and relearn it in a way on your own, versus being during COVID, right? Online learning, where you could kind of pause, learn it a little bit, test yourself, and have more of maybe an interactive and personalized learning approach. So that's really interesting that, there's both sides, right? Of course, the isolation must not have been easy, because we're recovering from that. It's It seems like people are definitely gravitating towards more maybe extracurriculars and more community-based activities. So that's great. And we know that you've been a big participant in a lot of those activities and programs, including some
I
of the
try
things
to
we'll,
be.
we'll touch on. Yeah. But in terms of osmosis, since we started on this topic, I'd love to know how you first learned about it, especially in Turkey, and what impact did that have on your learning experience?
The first time I heard of it, and I'll be honest, was in first year when. So the way it works for us is that first year we weren't learning that much of medical topics. Rather, we were learning a lot of sciences, so a lot of physics, biochemical sciences, and biology. So it wasn't really medically relevant. By medically, I mean information that you could use in practice clinically. So at that stage, we were all kind of very lost the first years of what do we need to do? What do we need to use? Because the textbooks are huge. And I'm not much of a textbook reader myself. I do prefer visual learning. And I remember we had a meeting with some of the older students from the upper years, like year twos, and they were just telling us about some of the tools we could use. And it did help us, but at the same time, they overwhelmed us as well. They're like, you could use this, and one of them was osmosis. So I did kind of take notes down. And in year two, when COVID happened, and when I entered year two and isolated and need to, I guess, study at my own pace, I was also looking for extra resources because I felt like the videos from our lectures were great, but for me to better understand the topic, I felt like I needed some extra resources. And so I went through that list one by one, that same list that I took when I was in year one, that the upper years suggested to us. And once I reached osmosis, where I opened it and I saw lots of emojis or lots of like lovely characters smiling at me, and I'm just thinking, wow. So I guess I could learn medicine through what's it called, a more interactive and fun and approach rather than having to open a video and it's like an audiobook where you're going slide by slide and everything's written down, barely any pictures. So it just felt like the videos from our educational institutions did really feel quite like an audiobook. And I felt like a lot of the resources online, like on YouTube as well, came across as an audiobook to me. So Osmosis really stood out because they were really showing the topic. So I remember it was endocrinology. So basically showing the path of where the hormone was made in the brain and where it reached which organ. Like just seeing that even as a drawing, as an animation, helped me to better understand it so much better than just reading how the hormone goes to the, lumen side of the cell. And I didn't even know what the lumen side of the cell meant, but but Osmosis videos was actually showing it to me. So personally, I'm quite of a visual learner. So that's where Osmosis really did kind of help me proceed with my education, to be honest, because I think medicine is a lot of visuals. And what I mean by that is that you're learning something 3D in a 2D manner, I don't think works at all. So I don't know, some people might be able to read a text and understand it well and get the picture in their head. But for me, I really do prefer to see the bigger picture, or I guess in this case, Osmosis really did help me kind of visualize the education that I was from my educational content.
Well, I want to give a big shout out to our whole team who's behind creating those videos and making learning engaging and fun. And we hear this actually a lot from students who say, gosh, I didn't know that learning could be fun. I didn't know that it could be engaging like this. They've kind of, just put their head down and really kind of been in the grind, I guess, in their education career to get to this point. And we know that medicine is high stakes. We know that the information is incredibly challenging. There's a lot of volume in the content that you have to memorize and retain as you go into medicine. And, it's changing. We're constantly discovering new things. And so it was definitely a big priority of Shiv and Ryan and the founding team and the early content creation team too, to make sure that what we were creating was not just abiding by these evidence-based practices, things like using memory anchors and mnemonics to help people learn, but was really grounded in evidence, but it was also fun and engaging because, students were spending so much time learning. So I love that it was helpful for you. And I love just hearing these stories that it actually did make your education better in some way. And hopefully that turns into you being, maybe not a better doctor, but having more time perhaps to spend with your patients or remembering those things a little bit better. And that's, of course, the bigger goal. So were there any other educational tools that you found helpful in your studies?
Educational tools. I think before I started using Osmosis, I was using Anki. And Anki really, for those listening not aware of what Anki is, it's like a flashcard program where basically you could construct questions for yourself, and you would actively have to challenge yourself later by recalling what the answer to that question was. For example, I don't know, define this term, and you would answer it to yourself, and you would see the answer. If you got that correct, the program Anki would ask you whether you got that correct or wrong. And based on that, it has its own algorithm that you could adjust. But by default, like, it's pretty good at bringing it up at a time where either just forgot or you're about to forget. And then when you do recall that information, there's something called the forgetting curve. So think of it as if you just learned something. And if you don't use that information, you don't recall it, you're just going to forget it. And if you do actively recall, test yourself. So testing yourself, I guess, one of the most important ways of learning. And that's why if you, for example, use programs like Anki, you would see that you would start to retain information much longer, and you would be able to actively recall it more, like, basically easier than if you had just read it once from a textbook and kind of hoped and prayed you would remember this on the exam.
Hoped and prayed you learned it by osmosis, maybe. You just slept on your textbook, basically. Maybe. Yeah, we hear a lot of great things about Anki, and we know a lot of students love that product. And it's funny because back in the early days, actually, Shiv and Ryan had created a flashcard app that was quite similar to Anki today and is still a part of the platform. But it was based on those two learning science principles that you just mentioned, spaced repetition and to the testing effect. And maybe we can link to those in the show notes, because if you are, especially early in your health education career, and you're trying to figure out how should I study best, or what are the best ways to study, using these tools and platforms like Osmosis and Anki can really help you embed these evidence-based ways of learning into your study sessions. And so it just makes it a little bit more automated, a little bit easier. You don't have to, break it down yourself, rather use these tools to kind of help you navigate that. So that's great. And we'll definitely link to some of that information in our notes. And just going back to your school experience a little bit, we mentioned that, especially during COVID, right, people were quite isolated, and perhaps that was one of the drivers for you getting more involved in extracurriculars. And one of the extracurriculars I didn't mention in your intro is that you were a member of the TOC or TOC.
The TOC Committee.
TOC, Medical Education Feedback Commission. Great. And tell us what your function was in that and what kind of feedback you provided.
I'm still involved with TOC, and it's really much aligned to why I guess I still love being part of the Osmosis community, is that its intention, this commission's intention, is to improve our university's medical education. So, like as the title says, we do get a lot of we do engage with getting feedback from our classmates, and then relaying that or liaising that information with the faculty, because usually there wasn't this sort of communication between students and the faculty. So the faculty wanted to know if things were going right or things were going wrong. Could there be areas that could be improved from a student's perspective? Because for them, it was simple to dictate for what the learning objectives should be, and that you should learn these. But that evaluation process is quite crucial to ensure everything is going the right way. So my role at that time, and I guess still is, to kind of receive our classmates' feedback after each chapter, or each, as we would call it, committee. For example, after the respiratory system, if we've learned it, we would say, did you feel like you've learned the learning objectives? Did the tools or the resources provided to you by the faculty, did it help? What did you think of the pace? Did you think the exam accurately highlighted or tested the learning objectives that you were meant to learn? And at the same time, by gathering these feedbacks, the commission does kind of think of any form of alternatives some ideas to provide to the faculty, so that this chapter, for example, the respiratory system. So when the next students come by and learn it, they would have a more smoother and a more efficient education. I think one of the proudest moments was when we were learning. We have a course called Medical English, where basically medicine has its own terms, and like the terms used in healthcare, they're like jargon. So they're like a very specific terms. And if you don't know the meaning, it comes across as jargon. So in the medical education, medical English, we were trying to break down each words, and we were doing this through PowerPoints. So it was the most boring class for everyone. TOEIC acknowledged it, and it was built by Pearson, and we offered this or recommended this to the faculty, and they started implementing it. And from there, medical English actually became really fun. And the reason I'm saying this very much connects with my reason of being connected with the Osmosis community is because I truly believe that having a better medical education system will really definitely assist in creating the best healthcare workers for the future who could provide quality healthcare. I think it all starts from the education. That's one of the reasons why I'm in TOEIC and still love being part of TOEIC.
Well, you're preaching to the choir here. I know that is a big reason why we do what we do and why our whole team does what they do, is trying to really empower clinicians and caregivers and students with the best learning experience possible so that they can deliver the best care and improve patient outcomes for all. One of the things I like to tie back for our team often is that, we could all be affected by this. We all have family members. We all will have health issues at some point in our lives. And so, for the sake of everyone on this planet, we need this education to be improved. So really love the zooming out perspective, or the zoomed out perspective of how something as simple as what you just mentioned, right? The medical English class being improved and how that could actually have ripple effects down the line. So you are also part of other committees and other clubs. In fact, you are a part of the Medical Humor Club, which sounds really fascinating. Tell us what sparks your interest in that and what the purpose of that club is.
I think for my classmates who are listening to this, they're probably very confused. The Turkish name of the club, I'll say it probably in the end, but for now, I'll explain. It all started when I was in first year, where I remember seeing a magazine called Bademcik, and this was a yearly magazine published at Physicians' Day, and it's just a magazine full of memes, and memes about our faculty members or memes about the medical education. It was basically sort of an outlet where, approaching Physicians' Day, our classmates have something to look out to. And as well, the faculty always look forward towards this magazine being released, because it was purely students' work, and sometimes even our faculty members' work, or professors wanted to as well submit their own artistic content. And we loved it. So this was kind of happening, but where the club came into aspect was when one of our lovely professors came up to me and blessed her, because she was one of the faculty members who was helping me integrate into Turkey in a smooth manner. And she said, like, we have this journal or this magazine that's being published every year, but there's no club for it. Would you be willing to kind of co-found this with some of the upper years? And I said, yes, that absolutely. So the idea did come from one of our faculty members. We did make it an official club. And from there, we did gather members from our classmates, from my year, from different years, to come by and try to make this into something bigger. So, for example, by hosting meme competitions this time. So really trying to get more people to get involved, not just the club members, and as well some different events. For example, a talent competition. So somebody would come by stage and basically show something to the audience that they're proud of. So this could be, for example, those who want to perform music or a song, or someone who wants to show how fast they could draw. So it's kind of along those lines, where it's a space or an outlet where students could basically come there, specifically medical students in this case, to come there and basically just have one of those non-educational clubs, so they could just have an outlet to express their artistic side, rather than, because we have a lot of clubs for like research club, reading club, and academics. So those are great, and I have so much respect for those. But what about the other side, where attending to one's artistic or extracurriculars. Well, that's also just as equally important. So that's where this club kind of formulated from.
That's fascinating. And I would love to see after this podcast does launch if any other groups have medical humor club or something along those lines. But I definitely agree with you that it's equally important to rest and play alongside all of the work that you do during school and in clinical practice. In fact, it probably balances the brain a little bit, that right brain, left brain thinking. And as you mentioned, really exercises that creative thinking, which can be really helpful in problem solving in other areas. So love that you've created that. And it sounds like you've spread a lot of joy, to use an osmosis value, spread a lot of joy to your classmates, and will continue to do so, I'm sure, as you integrate that into your future practice.
Thank you. It's just important to really keep account of addressing oneself, not just through academics, though that's just as important. But like the quote, instead of working to live, or rather live to work, keeping a nice balance would definitely help one to enjoy their extracurriculars just as much as their career. And in this case, I think it's quite sensitive when it comes to healthcare. You do have to ensure you always provide quality healthcare to those who need it. That's why it's really important to, it almost sounds like as if we're vehicles, but to maintain ourselves and service ourselves at the same time. Otherwise, we're not just harming ourselves, but we're possibly also putting another person's health at risk, whether it could be small or big. So that's why it's important to kind of not just treat your surroundings well, but as well as treat yourself, because that's, I think, just as important. You are going to be the main driver of your own journey, and as well the people you meet along your career. So definitely, I think attending to oneself is just as important.
That's a great way to put it, attending to oneself. And we had an initiative a while ago called Care for Caregivers, which included a lot of these same ideas, in that you can't go through medical school or through medicine as a provider, expecting your own health to just take care of itself when you're putting in long hours and when you're sometimes being sedentary during studying or whatnot. It's really important that if you look at a pie chart, for example, and you break down the different components of your own health, the physical health, that might include sleep and nutrition and exercise. There's also, of course, the mental health and the kind of social emotional health and these other areas that we have to tend to. So it sounds like this Medical Humor Club really checked that box and was really a good way for people to exercise kind of whole health and holistic health as they were going through their very intense, I'm sure, and at times very stressful medical education journey. So I love that. And on that note of, kind of expanding your skill set, expanding your experiences, we are constantly trying to figure out how we can expand our teaching and our knowledge within Osmosis and within the Osmosis platform. And since you're quite versed in our content and you've been kind of a part of our community for a very long time, would love to hear your perspective on what other things we could do to fill in content gaps or any particular topics that you're interested in that we would like to see Osmosis create videos about.
Oof, that's a tough question. Initially, until I realized this myself, I was going to comment on, for example, interpersonal development videos. But if for those who don't know, Osmosis does have a lovely clinicians corner where there are lots of lovely videos recorded, especially by Dr. Hillary Acer, talking about very important skills, for example, patient-doctor communication, and or for example, trying to avoid burnout, or how to give a good communication or oral presentation. So those sorts of interpersonal skills, I definitely do think are probably something that one not just needs to think about. But I guess in terms of Osmosis, though, if there's any other video ideas that I guess I could provide besides the interpersonal part, is not that we're approaching a more digital age and online age. I think it would be interesting to see a bit of a digital health or telemedicine as well being incorporated, or as well health policies, is to, because no one really explains to us the concept or what's going on behind the scenes in terms of health policies, even though that's a lot of what's driving the healthcare system. I feel like just as much as healthcare policymakers are involved, just so should nurses, doctors or anyone in the healthcare field should be aware of how they could have an impact as well. I feel like that could be possibly a topic to talk about. It does touch a lot about, I think, access to healthcare equity, and it as well puts, I think, a lot of the healthcare workers as well present with how the system works, rather than, unfortunately, in some countries, it's considered that the healthcare workers are a victim of their healthcare systems, although each country does have their own system. But I think just understanding and approaching the concept of what does normally go on behind the scenes, I think would be an interesting topic, nevertheless. So probably that's something I could touch upon.
That's great. Yeah, that's a really thorough list. I love the expansion of interprofessional or interpersonal skills. As you mentioned, we have the Clinicians Corner, but we are constantly building out more content. In fact, we have a lot on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, various videos on things like communication and emotional intelligence and so on. So there's a lot within that space that I think we do already have, as you mentioned. But the health policy piece is really interesting. We've actually had a number of guests on our podcast over the last several months who are part of different associations and organizations. For example, the Student Nurses Association, or we've had a number of different, mostly North American-based groups who are very active in policy, and that's certainly an area that we haven't touched on much. But what I learned from those conversations is that each healthcare provider and even healthcare students can play a really active role in advocating for better policies and advocating for policies that either protect themselves as providers or their patients. And so I agree that it's a big area that's largely untouched, but something that would probably benefit all of us. So it's a really great list. And as you start to plan for your future, Parsa, you've got a lot of exciting things ahead. I know you've discussed a number of potential options, but you are an international medical graduate, soon to be graduate, and I know you've got your sights set on potential international practice. And tell us what's next for you in the short term and maybe even the longer term, 5 or 10 years down the road.
I'm really glad you asked this right after I made kind of a decision about that, like a few days ago. So I'm glad.
So timing's good.
The timing is good.
Good.
It's so I just did come back from a conference from the UK, the British Society of Gastroenterology conference. So I think, as the name implies, I am seeing myself in the field of gastroenterology in the future, and I guess more specifically in the UK. With that being said, so at the moment in my internship year, my final year, after that I would have to start my foundation year for 1 year in the UK, and then afterwards I would start my internal medicine training for 3 years, and hopefully after that my gastroenterology fellowship. So that's, I think, a good 5 to 7 years down the line
covers you
where I
pretty well.
see myself. Yeah, it covers me pretty well.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about medicine is that, there are pretty set paths that you can follow. Although, as we know, some people decide to kind of create their own paths. But it sounds like kind of the equivalent of what we know of in the U.S. as an intern year in residency, and then 3 additional years of residency type training in the UK, and then fellowship. So yeah, you've got a lot ahead of you, but I'm glad to hear that you've decided on your specialty and geographic region that you're focused on. And of course, we wish you the best as you continue to take steps towards that. And remind me again, you're pretty close to finishing this last year, right? So how much more time do you have at your university?
So we did just finish year 5 officially, I think, yesterday. And so hopefully we will be starting our internship for final year next week.
Wow. One more year.
Yeah, 1 more year. So
Okay.
June 2025, July 2025 is when I anticipate to hopefully graduate.
Amazing. Well, we will certainly be rooting you on. Now, I do have another final question for you related to advice that you would give to your fellow healthcare students and the audience, really, of folks who are listening to this podcast who may cross medical, nursing, physical therapy, and so on, and also geographic regions, as you're well aware of. So what advice would you give to this group about meeting the challenges of healthcare in this moment today?
Though I am still pretty much early in my career, but I think if there's 2 things I could provide, one of them was attend yourself and don't be ashamed to attend yourself. What I mean by that is it's to, amongst the healthcare system, we're in some, specifically in some regions where it's quite compact and quite stressful. I think it's important for the healthcare workers to, or students to remember that in order to, how they say in the plane, please put on your oxygen mask before attending children, because if you don't, you won't be able to put the oxygen mask for the children. So with that being said, and unfortunately because of the lack of discussion of it, the lack of discussion of mental health, it's quite ironic that even within the healthcare community, it's a very stigmatized topic. So please do not feel ashamed to attend your own healthcare, your mental well-being, because that's very much important. And I think the second one that I would say is always be curious for your patients. Even though I haven't have that much of a experience with addressing patients or communicating with patients as much as residents or consultants do. But I think what I've really realized throughout my training and is that the moments that really stand out to me is that connection that the healthcare person makes with the patient. It always, but really does lead to a better quality of healthcare. But at the same time, that trust that's built between with the patient is quite beautiful. So always don't just see your patient as another patient. See them as a whole person who are entrusting you with something that they wouldn't be entrusting anyone else. So that's, on one hand, it's a very specific skill to be entrusted with one's health. I guess with that being said, if you're a nurse, a physical therapist, or a doctor, in that case, like someone is entrusting your skills, and at the same time, they're entrusting you as a person in general. So it's only respectable, at the very least, to give that time and as well that investment into the patient, back to the patient. So they're not just someone who's in the list that they need to get treatment for. There are people with lives who are attending and requesting for assistance. And I think they just really need to be treated like, I think the saying goes, treat them like humans. So yeah, I think that's the two advices I could give. Not sure if my advices would change in the future when I advance in my career, but I think for now, I would stick by saying attend yourself, and as well, really do attend your patients. Do be curious about them, for them, and care about them.
Well, that's beautiful advice, Parsa, and advice that anyone can take going forward. So taking care of yourself, attending to your own health and well-being, and attending to your patients as though they are truly humans that you could be curious about, get to know them and really, take care of them in a way that you would maybe, hopefully for yourself as well. I thought you might actually throw in a third bit of advice. I was recalling a funny story about one of your recent rotations where you had to wear a tie. And one of your advisors, I think, was a little bit strict about the dress code, but maybe we'll leave that for a future podcast.
Yeah, that was quite an experience. You know what? I'll just throw it in there. Do dress nice into your rotations. Do dress nice. And if you're like someone who's not growing out your nails to play the guitar, maybe cutting your nails is also nice as well.
Clean up.
Clean up, yeah.
Like that was a good lesson learned.
Do show up fresh.
Yeah.
It was a lovely lesson, and I still use it to this day. When I go to other rotations, they're confused, like, why is he dressing up this much? But I think it's nice. It's just showing up, dressed fresh as well, dressing formal. That doesn't have to be too formal, like maybe how I did it, but it's also a sign of subtle showing of respect to the field and
definitely
to the patient as well.
That's funny. Well, we will definitely share that advice to others too, and look forward to hearing how your advice changes as you go through your final year and prepare for your next steps in gastroenterology. And this is probably one of many conversations that we'll have over the years, but we certainly appreciate you taking the time to be with us today, Parsa, and share a little bit about your journey and some of the things that you've learned throughout your medical education. And we will continue to feature your stories on our platforms, as you're still definitely a big part of our community. And we just really appreciate you being here today.
Oh, absolutely. I would consider a privilege of mine. And thank you very much for having me. Hopefully, I guess we'll see what sort of things I'd be saying in the future in terms of advice. But nevertheless, thank you.
And with that, I'm Hillary Acer. Thanks for checking out today's show. Remember to do your part to raise the line and strengthen the healthcare system. We're all in this together.
If you like this podcast, please share it on your social channels. You can also subscribe to the series and check out all of our episodes at osmosis.org/raisethelinepodcast.